Welcome from the world of journalism and media, which we haven't heard a lot from today. But I'm really happy to be here because I think a lot of what we do at our organization, which is trying to change the narrative around how the climate story is told, affects a lot of what you do. And you can actually have a big role in helping change that narrative. As she said, I represent Covering Climate Now, which is a group I co-founded 6 years ago. So I've spent most of my career as an editor and as a foreign correspondent and as a reporter, and then recently was at the School of Journalism at Columbia University. And while I was there, I spent a lot of time studying how the climate crisis was being portrayed in the press, how it was being told in print, how it was being told in video. And the conclusion that I drew was that the story was being vastly underrepresented. Again, this is 2019, and there was really a sort of media silence around climate change. The scale of the resources that newsrooms were devoting to it weren't matching the scale of the story. I viewed this as a big moral, professional failing of journalism, and I became convinced that something had to be done about it. So, with a colleague, we founded this group. One of the interesting things that we did was we went around and talked to newsrooms all over the world. And what we learned was that within most of those newsrooms, there were people, usually younger people, who cared a lot about climate and the climate story, but they were being blocked in their efforts to tell that story by their gatekeepers, editors, producers, owners of these publications. So we thought, is there a way that we can sort of equip these people and help them and give them a sense of community so they can feel emboldened to tell this story? So our idea was to sort of form a community, a collaboration of newsrooms, a collaboration of people, and get them organized and help them, give them what they need to cover the climate story. That, by the way, was an unusual notion. The fact that you could get newsrooms to cooperate with each other, to join each other, was sort of radical. But it came together. And so in the fall of 2019, we decided we're going to devote 1 week in the fall just to get people to write about climate change, just do that. We had no sense of what you should say, how you should say it, just cover climate change. The idea was we would have a few dozen newsrooms in the US and around the world do this, and maybe that could begin to change the conversation. That week that we chose happened to coincide with the week that Greta Thunberg put hundreds of thousands of people in the streets around the world to talk about climate change. And that combination of media attention and public action changed the conversation. And it forced us to grow enormously. We now have more than 500 partners in our organization. It's the biggest media collaborative in the world. Our members range from Bloomberg and Thomson Reuters and The Guardian and AFP, all the way down to tiny little newsrooms on every continent you've never heard of. And for a long time, until just fairly recently, there was a lot of progress around media coverage of climate change. About a year ago, we noticed that began to slip. We noticed that a lot of, and it wasn't just in the US, about half of our partners, by the way, and we're a nonprofit, about half the partners in our nonprofit are based outside the US. But this was especially true in the United States. We started to notice that newsrooms were becoming more cautious about their coverage of climate change. They were leaning more into the politics of the story as opposed to everything else that you could be writing about climate change. They saw it as they feared that it was a subject that was going to turn off their audience, that it was depressing, and that it was sort of defeatist. So at the end of last year, we came across a series of peer-reviewed research reports, all of which came to the same conclusion. They showed that between 80 and 89% of the people in the world not only cared about climate change, but they wanted their governments to do something about it. We thought this was remarkable because it it represented an opportunity to change this narrative around how climate change is covered in the press. So we launched a project called the 89% Project. We launched it, by the way, the research is based on a Gallup World Poll from 140 countries. Again, it shows that this number is basically everybody. And that most of the people don't know that they're part of this global majority. They think that they're alone. They think that they are a fringe, and they're not. The coverage was wrong. So what we did was we went back to our roots from 2019. We went to our membership and say, let's all report on this 89% number. Let's all report on the fact that the way we think about climate change is mistaken. The goal, our goal, is again to change the narrative. It's to change the narrative towards one that I think matches the moment that we're in. It's inclusive. Everybody is part of this problem. It's solution-based, and it's not based on fear. So we launched a coverage week in April where we asked everybody to do this. We had press from 22 countries about the 89% Project. We had it in many languages. We had people writing about this fact from every possible angle. I'll talk about this in a second, but we're going to return to this in October and in through COP. It's hard to see from this slide, but what we did was we came up with a logo and a hashtag and a through line that every media outlet that wrote about this used. So there was a sense of noise in the press around this fact. And you can see it ran in different languages. The Guardian, which is one of our lead sponsors, devoted a huge landing page to this that they're now continuing. And then what happened is something that was completely out of our control, but that was super interesting and I think is super relevant to you. People outside of our world, outside of the journalism world, noticed the 89%. A couple of months ago, an environmental group in the UK projected this onto the White Cliffs of Dover to show their support of the idea of the 89%. You can't see it, but these are all little pixelated pictures of people that represent this. This is John Batiste, who's an amazing jazz musician who wrote a song about climate change and we featured his song. He talked about how he's part of the 89% and how he's trying to bring together the music industry to care about this too. So there were people going on social media holding up signs that said, I am the 89%. We're a journalism service organization, but all of this helps get attention to this fact and helps newsrooms feel like this is a story they have to write about, this is something that's moving, this is something they have to be involved in, and consumer goods companies have come to us and say, hey, we think this 89% thing is cool. Is there a way that we can also get involved too? So there is a ton of opportunity. As I mentioned, we're going to be doing another big push in October. Am I running? I am running out of time, but I'm doing okay. And we're going to move beyond the numbers to profiles of people. Who are these people? It turns out that 89% is just another word to say everybody. But it is not a monolithic group. There's a lot of nuance and gray in who these people are. Some people are like farmers and people who fish for a living and hunters who know that something is happening in their world, who care about it, but politically they don't support a lot of the solutions. Those are great stories. So we are trying to get newsrooms to lean into the complexity of this and to write about this, and to stop being so afraid of the climate story. They literally will tell you now that they are worried, especially in the US, that simply writing about climate is going to label them an activist. Or simply writing about climate is going to be seen as putting them on one side or the other of the political divide. We're here to tell them that you don't have to think about it that way. You have to tell human stories. You have to tell stories of people. So there is a lot of movement right now in terms of newsrooms who are part of our partnership preparing a big push. It's October 26th through November 2nd. around this second phase of the 89% project. The Guardian, again, put out a call on all of its global editions with a form that say, hey, do you care about this? Tell us your story. And people are filling it out, and they published the first results of this about a week ago. The Asahi Shimbun in Japan is doing a series of video interviews around people who are part of the 89%. It's happening all over the world. There's high school students. There's a group of high school newspaper reporters who are reporting on this, and again, trying to bring their community into this conversation. So we are super excited about the possibility of this. We think changing the narrative around the coverage of climate change is more important now than ever. Newsrooms, and we are funded, our organization is funded by foundations and individuals. They are scared too. They are scared. They are scared of funding, especially in the US, organizations that could see to be getting them in trouble. So this inclusive message that climate is about everybody is super important. It's important for your investors, it's important for your shareholders, it's important for media that we care about. I have a few minutes for questions. If anybody has any questions, I encourage you, all the information about the project, including the science that it's based on, all the scientific studies are there. You can see some of the stories that people produce from this last week of coverage in April. You'll see an FAQ that talks all about how this works and how media organizations are getting involved. And I encourage you to get involved however you can. Reach out to me or go through our website and we can be helpful. Any questions?
Hola.
Thanks, Kyle. Really interesting. It looks like a lot of the conversation is around don't polarize, vegan versus carnivore, or how to not push people away. How do you think we strike the opposite tone? Because how do we avoid risking the echo chamber?
I think you'll see a lot more of that in this next round where we are sending out hundreds of postcards to random homes in the US saying, just tell us what you think about climate. I think what we're trying to do is to find the areas where people sort of come together and where there's overlap. That's what we're trying to do in this next phase. AFP, which I mentioned, is part of this project. They are doing interviews with people around the world and asking them what their climate tipping point is. What is the thing that caused you to go from sort of caring about this to really caring about this? And again, I think one of the flaws in a lot of the media coverage of climate is it's only focused on one type of person, which is the person who cares deeply and passionately about this and who also thinks that if you don't, there's something wrong with you. We're trying to expand that view. And I think you'll see a lot more nuance in this next wave. Does that answer your question? Thanks.
Hi, thank you. How do you ensure certain coherence between these 500 partners, let's say around a certain direction? You mentioned being solution-oriented. So how, for example, for that angle, how do you ensure that coherence in the direction?
What we try to do is we give guidance to people. It turns out journalists hate being told what to do, and they hate being told how they should do stuff. So we're really careful about that. But we do try to model. That's probably one of the most important things that we do. We will take coverage that's really good, and we'll blast it out to our whole partnership saying, you should take a look at this. It's amazing. The way that they've done this or that is really super effective. That really works for us. We just finished a huge round of we do an annual awards. And the point of the awards is to recognize great climate journalism, but it's also to do this modeling. Not to tell you what to do, but just sort of show you how others are doing. But it's a little bit of the Wild West. And there's a lot of some organizations are really committed, some are really hesitant. So we're trying to sort of walk gently through all of this. But I think some of the core messages about solutions-based, about inclusiveness of the fact that so many people caring about this, about the fact that the science is settled, which is a case that we have to make in the US right now really aggressively. I think that is coming throughout the coverage. One more, I'm told.
Hi, I work in policy, and I was just wondering, because this is super interesting, because there's obviously a big shift right now in how we perceive, or how politicians perceive how citizens care about climate change. So I was just wondering how much you've engaged so far with policymakers and with that world, and how it's been received.
I think policymakers, I think there's a little bit of performative dancing going around where people they say that they're backing away, but actually in private, they understand what's happening. One of the reasons that we spend a lot of time working with mainstream media, as opposed to influencers and social media people, we do that too. But the policymakers really care about the mainstream press. They really care what they think. So it's really important to us to make sure that they understand. It's an extremely difficult time politically in the US around climate change. I mean, there's no denying that. And one of the disappointing, as somebody who spent their whole career in media, one of the disappointing lessons I've learned is the press will follow. The press will follow the sentiment. I think they should lead it, and that's what we spend a lot of time trying to do. But if they sense that political leaders are backing off, if they sense that it's too charged, they'll back off too. So that's why we're really trying to embolden people to keep it going. We do engage with policymakers. We have them on as in interviews and as newsmakers, but our focus is pretty much exclusively on media. Anybody else?
We have.
Thank you.
I see your hand.
Oh, do we have another one?
I saw a hand. Vale. Great. I think we have time for a.
So there is a guy in the US called Donald Trump that he's saying that climate change is a lie, and he just said it last week in the United Nations, and so this is being propagated throughout the whole US. Do you think that something like your initiative has the power to fight against the force of the Trump narrative?
What's important, I mean, we were alive through the first Trump term. So we dealt with this. And it sort of harkens back to, it hasn't been too long ago where most media was both sidesing the climate story. They were having scientists talk about how real it was, and they felt obligated to bring on somebody else who didn't think it was real. And over time, that norm was obliterated. Most newsrooms, most news organizations realize they can't do that. It's not honest, right? So we're facing the same issues with Trump now. We're sort of rolling back to that kind of debate. Like, the fact that he said this doesn't mean that you have to give it equal bearing with the science. I think that we're further along than we were last time, so I think it will catch up. And there's a much bigger issue about Trump in the media here, which is him completely controlling the narrative and him deciding what gets attention. And it's not just climate. It's happening with health. It's happening with trade. It's happening with the military. So it's a bigger problem, but I think newsrooms sort of learned that I don't think there's no debate in serious newsrooms about the science of climate change. Whereas when we first started in 2019, we were still hearing that from newsrooms, that you had to give voice to people who felt otherwise. So we're further along, but it's a huge challenge. Thank you.